Well, hello everyone and welcome to today's webinar. Today we've got really one of my most fun things to talk about, which is going to China and going to the Canton Fair. We're actually going to talk about everything what I would call Canton Fair 101, ultimately how to profit from the Canton Fair, whether you're an e-commerce seller or an Amazon private label seller. So with that said, let's just go ahead and jump right in and get right to some of the stuff going in. A couple of things of what we're going to do. We're going to go over this and cover it, and we're going to have time for question and answers at the end. There are plenty of people who can talk and read questions at the same time. I am not one of them. So if you'd be so kind as to hold your questions to the end, we'll try and get to every one of them that we can. And if we can't get to a question, we'll see if we can do something through email follow-up. So at this point, depending on, we've got a lot of people here, but I'm hopeful we can get to everybody's question. So with that said, let's go ahead and go to let's talk about what we're going to cover today. I think that's kind of the important thing to talk about. What we're going to do is I'm going to try and give you an overview of the fair, what it is, what to expect. So before you decide to go or not, or you're trying to find a way to profit from it, you should have a pretty good idea of what it is and how it's going to benefit you as an e-commerce or Amazon seller. We're going to talk about who should go and who shouldn't. We're going to talk about how to get the most out of your time while you're there. And then the system or the formula I use to find products not only for myself, but people who I take on trips as well. We're going to talk about dealing with suppliers. I've been dealing with suppliers for, 20-some years now. I've been to trade shows for off and on for this same time frame. And I think there's little ins and outs that I think will make it that much more beneficial to you. We're going to talk about travel arrangements, how to get there, what to expect when you're going to travel, and then an easier way to go to the fair. And then we're going to take question and answers at the end. So one thing I want to make sure that you do is I want to ask you to try and stay to the end, because I'm going to give away a free product checklist. And some of you may have this, and this is something that literally what it does is it gives you a scalable way, a measurable way to be able to determine if the products you're choosing are going to be viable e-commerce or Amazon products. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Mark Adams, and I guess I have the Scott in there because if you have a name that's as common as Mark Adams, it's almost impossible to get the domain name, so I had to put my full name in there to get the domain name, but I simply go by Mark. That's fine. And I'm a full-time seller on Amazon, and I've been doing e-commerce since 1999, so this is an area where very well knowledge, and this is where I spend the better part of my day. I've been a private label merchant in one form or another now for over 27 years. I had one person type in another webinar I did when I brought that up. He says, gosh, I'm only 24. You've been doing this since before I was born. It's like, thanks for making me feel old there, son. But anyway, I've been doing this a long time, that's for sure. I have done millions of dollars of merchandise on and offline and have created literally thousands of private label products over that 27 plus years. As I was mentioning earlier, when I used to have retail stores, and before the internet, you used to have to go to trade shows to buy your products for your stores. The only other way to do it really was through a catalog. So I've been very, very well versed and experienced in going to trade shows. And now I go to China twice a year to the Canton Fair, and then it's where I buy my own products for my private label business. And I also host a conference there called Private Label Canton, which is for e-commerce sellers. Along the way, I've started, built, and sold 6 different businesses, everything from a chain of clothing stores, which was my first business, to a car bumper factory, a winery. It's kind of fun being a head taste tester at the winery, but I will say you should probably never turn a hobby into a business. But I've been doing things, whether it be brick and mortar up into the current digital state that we're all in right now, for a long time. I live in Charlotte, North Carolina, and I do videos and write on how to sell on Amazon and e-commerce, as well as I help other people create their own brands to sell on e-commerce stores and Amazon. And I've put out one of the leading courses in the area called FBA Head Start. And I do a video and podcast called Private Label Live. So a little bit of the skinny on me there is that this is something I kind of live and breathe and been doing a long, long time. So I consider myself fairly knowledgeable and experienced in the area. And I live it and breathe it every day. And what I do in the course of that day is just trying to share that knowledge with other people. So part of the reason we're here today is to share some of that knowledge. So let's jump right in and do that. I want to talk about the fair and kind of set the tone here. At this point in my career, I have done several thousand courses and get several thousand people in my community, this kind of thing, and all this kind of, and I probably have individually coached over 300 people as far as their Amazon or their e-commerce business. One of the common threads I hear from everybody is that how hard it is finding products. Well, in reality, the problem at the Canton Fair is filtering them out. I'm not going to sit here and tell you the streets are gold. If you've ever seen any of my videos or know that I'm not one for hype, but I do think too is that there are so many products there that it can be overwhelming, and you got the opposite problem of being able to filter out so many products. But ultimately, if you can't find enough products there to build a large income, you should just give up and go get a job, because there's no other place to go that's better than this. There are other places, but nothing that I think is better and more widely spread out with all the different options and products and going to the Canton Fair. So this is your ultimate mecca, if you will, if you want to find products. All right, let's take a look at the overview of the fair, and let's talk about what it is and ultimately what it isn't. But the Canton Fair is really the largest wholesale market in the world. And I can't remember the exact date. It's either 1947 or 1957, somewhere in there it's been going on. So it's not a Johnny-come-lately type of scenario. And they actually have it 2 times a year, which it's in April and October. And if you hear the word Canton or Guangzhou, it's actually the same city, Guangzhou. And again, I know I never pronounce that right when I say it, but close as I can do in English. Canton is really the English word for the city of Canton. And you'll hear it, again, that's why it's called the Canton Fair, because it's marketed to people all over the world. So if you go in, there are 3 different phases, or what we would call stages. And each stage has over 20,000 different vendors. And to kind of put that in perspective of how big that is, if you go to a big city, let's say here in the United States, New York, Chicago, Orlando, a lot of conventions, things like that, that convention may have 3 or 4, maybe 500 different vendors in that particular trade show. If you go in the Canton Fair, they've got one floor that has nothing but clocks and they have everything, watches and everything having to do with time, wall clocks, wrist watches, just clocks in general, desk clocks. And I'm walking through this, I'm thinking, good gosh, how many people can sell clocks? And I actually kind of made a rough count, and I figured there were like 500 vendors as I counted people in the aisles and multiplied, 500 vendors of people just selling clocks. So if you go in and think of 20,000 vendors, they've got like, I can't remember, it's like 16 buildings and then some temporary buildings where they've got like 500 vendors on the floor, and some of the buildings have 4 floors. So it just goes on and on and on, and it's just so many people there. And the quantity of vendors, and it's outstanding, the products and things you see. You're going to see products that you've never seen before, forgotten about, or even never imagined. They're all there at one place. Each one of these phases lasts 5 days, so you can typically come in and you got time to meet and do whatever you want to do. One of the things that's important, I think, is that you make sure you're in the right place for the products in which you have interest. So, for instance, phase 1 is about electronics and household goods and things like they've got motorcycles and machinery and some things like that as well. Phase 2 is really probably 95% of what for the e-commerce seller or Amazon seller is going to be, because they're going to have household items. They're going to have things having to do with kitchen items, bathroom items, gardening supplies, pet supplies, all those types of things that are consumer goods are really phase 2. Phase 3 is really going to be about office supplies, textiles, health and medical things, sporting goods, that type of thing. So if you want to know a more specific list, you can go to cantonfair.org.ca, and you'll see a list of some of the specific categories by what's there. Admission is free to the fair. All you have to do is just fill out a little bit of paperwork and check in when you're there, and you can get in for free. As far as going to the fair, if you're really thinking who should go, why should you go, who shouldn't go, that type of thing, I think you should go if you're really looking to find products that everybody else doesn't have access to on Alibaba. What you'll find is that most of the suppliers there are actually not on Alibaba. There are certainly some that are. However, you're dealing with people who may be able to make something that very, very few people have access to. And the fun thing of this too is that you can go in and make custom products. It's you'll ask them, say, you'll pick up something and say, hey, can you make a custom version of this and change this part to this? They'll look at it and they'll think for a second, they'll write something in Chinese language. Oh yeah, we can do that, no problem. And you'll find it's really not that much more. I guess it obviously depends on what you're doing, but it's not that much more to be able to have that done. And it's a way to separate yourself from other Amazon products and ultimately other Amazon sellers. One of the things too is that normally if you're going to do samples, you might go through 2, 3, 4, 5 vendors, whatever you're doing, and then have those sent to you, whether you're in Europe or Australia or United States, and it's going to be quite a bit of money for those samples to come in. You actually can walk in the booth and pick up and touch and handle the individual items. That might be a little bit of variation that you're having made, but you can at least see the quality and see it instantly. So that's really a nice cost savings right there. The other thing too is we all talk about establishing face-to-face relationships with your suppliers. Well, when they know that you have flown halfway around the world to see them, they're laser focused on dealing with you because they know that you're deadly serious about your business, or you wouldn't be there. So for anybody who's ever said they don't get a response or it takes a while for the suppliers to deal with them, they're there, they're in customer acquisition mode, and they want to work with you. The big thing in this too is you're going to get a whole lot better pricing, because there's a kind of a running joke that there's Western prices / American prices, and then there's Chinese prices. So the prices that we pay that we all think are dirt cheap, there's still levels below that. And if you're sitting there dealing with them, you're ultimately going to get better pricing by negotiating face-to-face. We had one of our students took on the trip a couple times ago, and when I tell the story, I can never remember the prices now, but I do remember, I think he was saying he was paying $3.15 for his item, and he found a similar supplier at the show that got it all the way down to 51 cents. He had to buy a little more quantity, but the simple fact he was there, and just seeing the look on the guy's face the whole trip after he knew that he had just saved thousands of dollars and then all the money he would make going forward, he was just on cloud nine the whole time. What we find typically, though, is that was above average. What most people who compare existing products, what they find there at the fair is they get about a 30% discount. And that seems to be the consensus of what they were doing before. It's a big place to get ideas for new products. We all talk about going to stores or doing all kinds of different things where we find products. But it's very, very easy when you're just walking by and your every item is potentially an Amazon product or not. It's kind of like it's dropped right in your lap. But ultimately, this is a way to separate your Amazon business from the masses when you go to the fair, because it's a barrier to entry. Most people will not go for whatever reason. That's just because of the way they are. But the people who go, I find this is my favorite trip and event that I put on, because people who go are deadly serious about their business and they really want to grow and they want to leapfrog over everybody else. And they're willing to do the work and the effort and take a trip like this to make it happen. And they're rewarded because it's all doable. And there's nothing that says you can't leapfrog to the top of the line ahead of your competition. And it's just one way to do it. And then again, in reality, it's just fun to go. I mean, I never in my wildest dreams as a little kid thought that I would end up going to China. But when you're there, it's one of those things that it's kind of like, hey, Toto, we ain't in Kansas no more. And it's kind of a fun thing just to see the people and the culture. And I can't understate enough how you can combine a business and pleasure trip here. When we're talking about the size of the fair, as if you look here, there's roughly 20 buildings of the fair. And there's even they even put some temporary buildings back here. But when I said 20,000 booths or vendors, if you will, what you see right here, again, you can't tell anything about the scale of this map, but this is 4 floors, and each one of these little buildings will hold, let's say, about 2,000 vendors in each one of these buildings. So each one of these buildings would be like 2 or 3 times the size of what the local boat show would be or the car show would be in your local convention center. It is just huge, and it's just massive. And then this bridge here, just to give you a thing of scale, is about half a mile. It's so long they got walking escalators here, and they got golf carts that go back and forth that move people from one side to the other. So just the vastness of this, to where over here you'll have gardening supplies, pet supplies, ceramics, all kinds of different things mixed in throughout in phase 2, and then different things, of course, in the other phases. But it's just, I always think of Marco Polo that I read when I was young, and one of the things he came back, he talked about how many people were in China and what the density of people was there. And the reality is nobody believed him. But you go to China now and it's the same type of thing. You can't believe how many people there are, and you can't believe how the density of people it is. And when you're in a building like this, you kind of see it. But it's just everything you ever want from a product standpoint is here. We actually had one person, I think, had a Fitbit on a trip or two ago. I think he said he walked 10 miles going through all of the different things and different booths, I guess. But regardless, it's a huge thing, and to get the most out of your time, we show you how to go in and eliminate some things that are not important to you. So you don't have to walk 10 miles unless you want to, but we can cut that down and streamline that for you. But I don't want anybody to feel overwhelmed when you go to the fair, because it's too easy to filter some things out. Thing about finding products is that you can go to one or multiple phases. Most people go to one phase, but there are some people who go to others. It really just depends on what your product interests are. When you go in, one of the things I talked about avoiding overwhelm is that start out and come in. If you have existing products, walk through and look for vendors who deal within that industry. Tell them about what you're doing, ask them about pricing, ask them about the products, and just ultimately see if you can find a better pricing or a better supplier for what you're looking for. Once you have that done, I think I'm a big believer in that as a Amazon or private label seller in any way, e-commerce store seller, you shouldn't pigeonhole yourself into one type of product. I think people do that, and I don't know why, because you see so many products that are out there that I always suggest to people is walk through and what I call a day of discovery. Think of that as almost impulse shopping, to where you kind of got your blinders off and you're looking in every booth you come to or items that you see, you're asking the question, would this make a good Amazon item? And the answer is, of course, either yes or no. But as I walk through, and we do a guided tour and get people going, but we did one floor, which was about 500 vendors. Each floor there was roughly about 500, give or take. And just by walking through and the formulas and things that we use, I found about 50 potential products on one floor, and that's out of 4 floors within 20 buildings. Now, not every single one of those would have turned out to be a viable Amazon product. However, once you go through some of the screening process, out of that 50, my guess is there were 5, 6, 7 products in there that were anywhere from $1,000 to $5,000 a month products. So that's just one floor of the whole thing. And I don't know what that number would be if you had that same percentage throughout all the floors and all the vendors, but I think it is not unrealistic at all to find 500 potential products. And again, then you start your research and you level that down, and maybe you walk away with your next 50 products if that's what you want to do. And then it's just a matter with your speed and budget that you have to be able to launch those products. But I can't stress enough that whatever you want is there. When you're dealing with suppliers, that's something a lot of people are concerned about with is the language. And what I find is that almost every one of these vendors speaks passable English. Now, you're not going to be able to have a high-level conversation in English with them, but I promise you they'll be able to communicate everything you need to do in regards to their business. And I always find when I compliment on them, they always perk up and they always appreciate that, because they think they don't speak English well. And as long as you can communicate and understand somebody, I consider that speaking it well. I mean, I don't speak a second language. I'm always amazed by people who can speak 2, 3, 4 languages, because, you know, if you think of English and you think of Chinese, good gosh, that's about as different as any 2 languages can be. So I appreciate the fact that they speak English. You won't need an interpreter. I think of all the booths I walked into over the years, there was only one booth where I can think of that we couldn't communicate. If they don't speak well enough, they'll get somebody who will interpret. So they'll do that. But I've only had to do that in a couple times. But 99% of the time, you can speak and say and do whatever you want. It's a culture that values politeness. When I deal with Chinese people, I always think of the people from India, the Indians here who are in the United States, who as a group are very polite. And I always think back to maybe the movies from the 40s and 50s and 60s where people here were actually polite. I'm sure they really weren't. But it's refreshing to have please and thank you and courtesy and respect and that type of thing. So that's kind of nice. When I got here, don't start out with a lie. One of the things I always hear, and people are just terrified by this, and maybe you are too, but it's like, okay, how are you, I mean, they're convinced that the Chinese supplier is going to scam them, all right? Well, then you hear some other people say when you're dealing with suppliers, whether it's an email or in person, tell them you're like a vice president of something of buying or purchasing or something. And then if they tell you a price, say you got to check with your boss. Well, I'm sitting here thinking people are worried about the Chinese supplier scamming them, but what does that person do? Is the first thing out of the mouth is they lie to the supplier. They misrepresent themselves. So who's scamming whom? So I would encourage you just to walk in and say, gosh, okay, I have a large e-commerce business in the UK, US, wherever, and I'm looking to add, your particular product, this type of product, to my line. Can you tell me about it? Because I assure you, they don't care that you're selling on your own e-commerce site, Amazon, whatever you're doing, or you're doing they don't care. I assure you, they don't care. All they want to do is know what you want to buy and kind of put together a price and get their product in your hands. That's how they survive. That's how they make money. That's universal. So I just would encourage you to think that through and consider how you approach them, because I know I never want to start a relationship and base it on a lie. That just makes no sense to me. But realize too, they're going to want to negotiate price and quantity right on the spot, and they're going to take orders at the show. However, they're not arm twisters. They're not going to force you to do anything. I find when I tell them that I'm jet lagged and I'm tired, I'm looking at a lot of things, I need to go home and look at everything, can you give me a price for, maybe it's good for 2 weeks, 30 days or something? And ultimately, they'll be glad to do that. So don't hesitate to do that when you need. Now, I just encourage you to make your decisions when you get home, other than at the fair. But if you want to do that and you're comfortable with it, that's fine too. A lot of people ask about samples, and that samples, typically they're not going to give you, because that's what they need to show other people coming through the fair. So what you may do is, if you want to ask them about samples, you may ask them that if I show up on the last day, can I have a sample and take it back? They may or they may not allow you to do that. They may have samples for you to take. But one of the good things regardless is that, again, we all know how expensive it is to have a sample come to you. You can actually sit there and pick up the samples and touch them and feel the quality and everything that they're doing without having to take the time of having it mailed in, or either the cost of having it mailed in. But anyway, you got to be prepared to walk away, and because, again, you want to put together a win-win scenario that's good for everybody. Because if if they're in a bad situation where they need an order and you get them down in price or they're not making any money, ultimately that is going to fail. You want them to be profitable. You want you to be profitable. There's enough margin there for everybody. And we talk about other things to negotiate and all that kind of stuff on the trip. But, that's just something that just be careful of how you negotiate off of that. And there's cultural differences. And every time you go on a trip, something always happens. You always have a memory coming back. And, of course, that's whether it's China or not. But I just think of when I was going through the booths the first couple of times I was there, I was realizing the differences of culture. In China, it's been about 15 years or so when they have been teaching English in the schools. Before that, they didn't. So if you're in your early 20s, you have learned English from a very, very young age. And all of these booths, they'll have a girl who is 21, 22, 23, 4, somewhere in that range, who is a person who will greet you. She speaks English. She's very polite. Well, I'm 53. I've been married 28 years, and, my life's pretty good. But, when you go in these booths, by Western standards, these girls are flirting with you. They're being very nice to you. And I obviously realize that they are interested only in your billfold. I get that. But I don't care whether you're 18, 38, 58, 78, any male enjoys the attention of the opposite gender. So I walk in a few of these booths, and every girl in there would be polite. They'd talk to you, and they'd smile, and, flirting by Western standards. By Eastern standards, they're just being polite, okay? And I get all that. But I'm allowing myself to get the big head here. I'm thinking these girls understand the universal truth that chicks dig Amazon men, right? So I walked in enough of these booths, and everyone, you walk in, and the next girl was prettier than the last, and she'd be polite, and she'd flirt with you. And I'm going to tell you, my head had swelled to the size of a basketball, and I was walking on cloud nine thinking, man, this is really pretty good. So I walked in this one booth. Of course, I probably couldn't even hardly get my head through the door, and I walked in. Now, it's hot over there. You're walking, you're perspiring, I guess, as you're walking. And I walk into one booth, and I've got a little perspiration, I guess, on my brow. And the girl walks up to me, the ubiquitous 23 pretty little girl walks up to you. She smiles, and then she turns around, and she reaches into a cooler, like a plastic cooler that they have there, and she hands me like a plastic bottle of cold water, which was much appreciated. And I smiled, did my bow, and I said, thank you. And she looked at me, and, and I'm thinking she's just being nice and flirting with me like all the other little girls. She looked at me, and she bows, and she says, in China, we learn to respect our older elders. So I'm sitting there thinking, I kept a straight face somehow. that little girl, bless her heart, she didn't know that she stuck a dagger in my heart. And all of a sudden, it's like you could just hear the air come out of my basketball-sized head. It went, as it went out. It's like, I realized ultimately then, I wasn't young anymore, and I just was fooling myself. But it's like she stuck a dagger in my heart, and she was like, she just took my mojo. She was like Dr. Evil, and I was Austin Powers or something. But it was just funny in the fact that she wasn't doing anything but just being perfectly nice, and by her cultural standards, she was being respectful to somebody who was older than her. But when she said we learned to respect our older elders, it's like, God, I could have wrung her neck. But it's just funny. And then every time you travel, it is funny. I mean, after that, I realized the next couple booths, I think I had my shoulders way down. My little bottom lip was quivering because she had just gotten to me. But make a long story short, I didn't buy anything in that booth. But anyway, when you go on a trip like this, you're going to have something fun, something that's just going to happen. So I just say, just roll with it. Just have some fun with it like I did in that. Your travel arrangements. Going to China is not hard. It's doable, but it is a little harder than going to most places. On the way of getting there to China, you'll need, of course, a passport, and I think you need to have 6 months left or remaining on your passport, the dates on your passport before it expires, so you can get in. You will need an entry visa, and you'll need to get that ahead of time. And I used to do this to where I just had visa on there. Then I had a lady ask me one of the questions, and I got a MasterCard. Will that work? That's not, I don't think so. This is, when you get on the plane, you get to another country sometimes, you fill out the paperwork to go into that country. So really what this is an entry visa is just paperwork you have to do, and you have to do this in advance before you go to China. If you're here in the United States, and I'm sure it's the same way in other English-speaking countries, you have to go to one of the consulates and basically give them your passport and give them the dates what you want to travel. Now, you can get two types of visas. You can get a business visa, which you have to have a letter or of invitation from the supplier you're going to deal with. And that's a 1 year type of thing. The other thing that I suggest people get is what's called a tourist visa, which that's actually good for 10 years. It's like, I think it's $150, $160 here in the United States, probably comparable amount in other countries. And then you do it, and they just stamp your passport and give you stick a little visa thing on your passport, and you're ready to go. Now, if you're here in the United States, obviously a big country, they have three different places where you can go. One's in Los Angeles, one's in Chicago, one's in Washington, D.C. But being a big country, you may be like I am. I'm like 6, 7, 8 hours, whatever it is, from Washington, D.C. I don't want to drive there and get my visa and drive back. So if you go and you Google, get a visa to China and say in the U.S., get a visa to China, U.S., you'll see travel agencies that will pop up, and they basically what you do, and this was a little disconcerting, but I found this is really the norm, is you mail your passport to this company. They walk it across the street over there, and then they get the visa for you, and then they mail your passport back to you, and they'll charge you about $50 to be able to do that. So all in all, you're around $190 or so for your entry visa into China, which will be good for 10 years. The hotels, you see a wide range of hotels. The hotels where we stayed in last time was the Langham Hotel, which is a 5-star hotel, and really, really nice hotel. But the first time I stayed a little farther out, and I took taxis back and forth. Taxis are very, very inexpensive once you get there. But the only thing I would say is you've traveled a long way. You're going to be jet lagged. You don't want to be tired here. You want to have your bodies in the best possible shape you can, so you're sharp mentally and rested physically, so you can go and do what you need to do in the fair. So if there's ever a time for you to splurge in a hotel, I think this place is where you should do it. When you go in, you will have gotten an invitation from the Canton Fair, which is simply a paperwork thing you fill out, and they email you a digital invitation. And then you print that out, and you take it along with your passport. And I think you also you need a passport, you need your invitation, and then you go to when you check in, you'll register for the fair, and then they'll take a picture of you and they'll give you a badge. So when you get that badge is also something that you can use again and again as well, and you only have to check in and register once. But that's really all that you need to go in. Now, one of the things too to realize is that when you travel there, realize that their internet system does not have access to Google, which means Gmail or YouTube or even Facebook. You can do a workaround with some things called some I think it's called VPN software, and I'm not sure exactly what the letters mean, but it sends a signal to other countries that have these things. But first time I went, I didn't know that. I should have known it, but I didn't know that, and I was out of touch for a few days on all of my things, and that made it rather hard because I wasn't expecting that. But one, that's again a solvable problem. Another thing you could do is, and I did this the first time I went, I actually flew into Hong Kong. Canton is actually right up the river from Hong Kong, where Hong Kong's on the coast and Canton's a little bit inland from that. But you can fly into Hong Kong and take a train from Hong Kong to Canton and then back to Hong Kong and fly out. You'll find that Hong Kong is much more of an international airport than Guangzhou, and it might be cheaper and it might be easier for you to do that. Plus, Guangzhou is really not much of a tourist city. It's a business city, whereas Hong Kong has so many things to do and see, and it's really very much a tourist city in many ways, and you'll see all kinds of different things there. Okay. One of the things of going to China is I find a lot of people have anxiety and apprehension, and I certainly understand that. But I also want to let you know that this is a very modern city. You know, if you're expecting the straw hats and rickshaws and things from old movies, that stuff's all long since gone. If you were to take the Chinese writing off the buildings and take the Oriental people out of the cities, you could walk and close and look through this, and this would be as modern a city as anywhere in the United States or Europe or I presume Australia. So you are not going back in time here. This is, you know, there's an infrastructure here. There's all kinds of things to go. So the trip is long, but I don't think this trip is really any different than going to any other big city. Although it's not a tourist city. As I mentioned, it's up the river from Canton, and that's actually how the city developed, where Hong Kong is such a large port. All the people here developed this city to manufacture so they could send their goods down the river to Hong Kong to be shipped out to other places. So it's kind of like places in the United States like Cleveland or Detroit or cities like that that are on the Great Lakes so they can have their goods shipped out other places. That tends to happen in a lot of places. But one of the things realized too is that logistics, like things like carrying cash and assuming everybody takes credit cards, are not as smooth as you would think. Hotels and Western places will take them, but many restaurants and certainly taxi cab drivers will not carry or accept credit cards. So I would encourage you to have enough cash on you to be able to do whatever you need to do. Another thing, people talk about being overwhelmed at the fair. It is rather large. It is daunting. But if you go through in a certain couple different ways and do some planning and have some help and guidance, you can eliminate probably 80% of what's not relevant to you, and then it becomes very manageable. Safety concerns of traveling. You know, we've had single women travel on it. We've had senior citizens, people right out of college. This last trip, or 2 trips ago, I think it was, we had a lady who was 5 months pregnant. So, you know, this is something that I find China to be, I feel safer there than I do in big cities at home. So that doesn't mean something can't happen, but where the fair is and where the hotel is, it's a very safe area. Best I can tell, it's very much a business. It's like going to a nice new modern business area in any city. But then again, the fear of the unknown, I think, is something a lot of people have when they're considering this trip, because yeah, it can be, there are some daunting things, but that's kind of the thing that you just got to get over that, because when I went the first time, I had a fraction of the knowledge that I'm sharing here, and I went, it was okay, but it was a hard trip, and it was something that that the groups and things that we take, we just try and make that a whole lot easier and smoother, so you don't have to worry about the logistics, so you can concentrate really on the fair. So if you're thinking about all this, what I just showed you and what just the couple of things that we talked about, you can certainly go to the Canton Fair on your own. The thing about this too is that if you go, that's fine, but it's going to take you a little bit longer to get through it. You're inevitably going to make some mistakes like I did the first time, and it's probably going to be more expensive as you just don't know where to go and where to eat and all those types of things. So if you're thinking about going to the fair, you know, I would invite you to come with us, because, you know, the thing about this too, just thinking about this, you know, you don't have to go to China to have a successful private label business. There are many people who don't, but ultimately this is just going to allow you, as we said earlier, to get better pricing, to leapfrog your competition. If you're serious about your business, you're going to end up there sooner or later. You just can't not do it. So ultimately, if you think through, where do you want to go from here? Well, if you want some guidance and help, I would invite you to join me at the next Private Label Canton, which again is really a workshop and buying event for e-commerce and Amazon private label sellers. When we talk about private label Canton, really what it is, first and foremost, it's access. It's access to me and to other private label sellers where we all sit in a room for several days and get to know each other and talk about the business and learn different ways to benefit things. You're going to basically establish new friendships and beneficial relationships with suppliers and things that you'd have never been able to do unless you were there. And you're going to feel like a real face-to-face actual community. We actually put together a Facebook group for this last group who attended, and after they've come back, there's all kinds of, you see the posts and people helping each other going back, and I think it's something that's an ongoing thing that these people are going to be lifelong business friends / real friends going forward. So I think access and networking and all the things, I know I go to a lot of events and different things, and for me the content is always helpful, but I can never underestimate somebody I meet who just may take me down a path that would have changed my life forever. So it's just something that I think is, I can't state enough how important that is for to be able to for the people you meet. You're certainly going to learn how to jumpstart and scale your business. We're going to go through basically 2 days of very, very advanced training just to show you how to do that. We'll talk about things of keywords, of setting your page up with the right pictures and the right copy and all the different things of dealing with shipping and everything that is behind the scenes important of how to do things. And then we're also going to spend a large part of the second day of being able to talk about how to navigate the fair, how to deal with suppliers, how to do things that ultimately put money in your pocket and benefit from the fair while you're there. Ultimately show you how to get that same 30% or more better pricing than what you would get online dealing with Alibaba or email. Again, you're going to lead with better face-to-face personal relationships with your suppliers. And when they know you, I would presume that if they've got 30 emails sitting in their box and they know you, you're the one that's going to go towards the top. But anyway, also go through and do a guided tour of the fair where I take you through and I show you what over the years I've learned of how to pick at products and how to say why this would work, why this wouldn't, and then really give you a jump start and a head start on being able to truly take advantage of the fair like an expert. So specifically what we do for the people who join us in Private Label Canton, before the fair, we have a live webinar where we touch on everything in more specific detail of getting your entry visas to preparing for the fair, your products, everything you need to know to come over and be confident and well prepared to take advantage. We start out, again, this part of this is social. We have an evening reception at the Langham Sky Bar, which is one of the nicest places it has to be in all of Guangzhou, and the views are just spectacular there, but really a fun evening there. And then we have the first full day of training and coaching, and even one of the things we do is group coaching. It's where we break off into small groups and everybody gets the opportunity to talk about what's going on in their business, any challenges they're having, and ask for any ideas of how to get help on that. And then, of course, when it's somebody else's turn, you try and help them with their situation. We really kind of try and put the power of the group together so everybody benefits from that. The same thing the second day, where that's really more emphasis on finding things at the fair. And then we do a guided tour of the fair, and that's really important when we walk through and we break into small groups and, again, show you why I like certain items, why I think they would work, how you might be able to combine and package certain items in ways that you haven't thought about before. And some of the feedback we get on that is the group coaching and the guided tour, some of the things that are the most beneficial things to them. We've got express badge check-in, where if you went on your own, you're probably going to have to go in and wait a couple hours like I did the first time in an incredibly long line out in the heat and humidity to be able to get your badge. We've got an express badge check-in where you can check in a fraction of that time. Then, of course, on the next couple of days, you can stay as many days as you want or as few days at the fair, but then you're going to be able to visit the fair on your own and come and go as you please. And then after the fair, we put together a 30-minute consultation coaching call where we talk about what you experienced at the fair. I give you my experience, ideas, thoughts on how to enhance what you saw, what you learned, so you can get those products up and launched and the correct ones chosen and get them launched properly. So pretty good agenda for what it is, and I've done this enough times now where we got this dialed in, and it's really, I think, just time and time again, I think it's just a helpful process. Who is it who attends Private Label Canton? Again, we've had people from people who have not launched a product who are just getting started to people who have six-figure plus businesses and multiple products. So it's really something that there's something in there for everybody. It's a worldwide event. We've had people now from, gosh, all over the world attend, and My best count is that we've had people from 17 different countries come through now, and which is really kind of interesting to me. But it's always interesting to watch people from different parts of the world connect like they're lifelong friends because they have something in common. We've had both men and women. We've had somebody who just recently graduated from college in this last group. We've had senior citizens. We've had married couples, business partners, of course, individuals. We actually had, as I mentioned earlier, we had a lady who was, I think, 5 months pregnant and a couple of trips before. So, appreciated her dedication and wanting to be there. But if you go to the webpage, which I'll show you in a bit, there's all kinds of videos on there of people who have attended, and they're sharing some of their experiences. They're talking about how good the food is and how good the training was and the people they met and all that kind of stuff. But I encourage you to go and take a look at that as well. Well, when you're part of the trip, what is it you're responsible for? Well, you've got to get there, which means making your own travel arrangements wherever you're coming from, which is your own airfare, your own, whether it be taxi or however you get to and from the conference. You got to get there. You can stay at the Langham Hotel where we stay, but if you don't want to stay there, you certainly can stay anywhere else. You're going to have a few meals, lunch and the snacks and things are going to be provided. And if you're staying at the Langham, that includes breakfast, and then any other miscellaneous expenses or things that you have. Where we're going to stay is at the Langham, and it's a 5-star type of hotel, and it is connected right to the fair. You'll see here, this, of course, is the hotel, and this is the fair. I don't know if any of you have ever seen this picture, but from an architecture standpoint, I saw this building somewhere before I even ever went to China. So it's a very world-famous type of building. I always got a Lego building because that's what it looks like to me. But anyway, we, as being part of the trip at the very beginning for people who book, we've got a limited number of rooms at a very, very discounted price. So if you were to stay at the Langham, and it does depend on when you stay, the night you stay, but it could be as much as $400 plus per night, and we've got it down to roughly an average of about $250 per night. So that's something that a hotel does for us because they appreciate us being there, and that's something they do to help keep us coming back. But can't say enough about the hotel because when you look at it, I mean, everything is just, it's really, really nice. They've actually got a golf course, a little mini putt-putt course, I guess, pitch and putt, whatever, out on the roof, that you can look and oversee the city and the skyline back there, which this is really kind of nice. When you're walking around there, you're thinking, gosh, this is kind of nice. Here's a sky bar I was talking about earlier where we do the reception. And after every day at the fair, we'll come back and meet as a group here and have drinks, dinner, whatever type of thing there. But really, really nice type of thing. One of the things about going to China is that you may have heard that the food is very, very different than Western standards. That is absolutely 100% true. First couple of times I went, I struggled with all there was to eat was McDonald's. And I tried to venture out and eat some of the food. And it's not that it's bad. It's just very, very different. And the taste, I couldn't tell what they were. I couldn't tell what was in it. And it kind of helped. It didn't help anything with my sleep and whatever else. And my body got all out of whack eating this different food. I'm sure I'd eventually would have adjusted. But the other thing, too, and I don't want this to sound bad, but you don't know what you're eating. So I made the conscious decision that we were going to eat well, and we were not going to have food be an issue for anybody. And so we went to the hotel, and we made sure we had very good Western meals prepared for us, that we had actually Chinese tea service, which is as good as any place in the world. We have an espresso machine in our room, not like room, but the meeting room where we have our event. And we just have snacks. We eat well. So I think, too, after going through this last time, I can't say that I've ever eaten any better than what I did before. All Western food prepared for the primarily Western guests that they have there. But eat really, really well. So don't worry about food. Now, I will say that if you want to eat somewhere else, you certainly can do this because, again, you don't have to eat and stay at the Langham. You can stay anywhere you want. We have a lot of fun when we go on these trips, too. Every time I see this picture, I think of old Fuzzy the waiter there, and we called him Fuzzy, and you really can't tell in this picture, but his hair was kind of short and fuzzy. So we were calling him Fuzzy, and, of course, I'm sure there's no translation in Chinese, but old Fuzzy, the first night we all sat down, this was a couple trips ago, I think we were at the Westin Hotel, where we sat down, and old Fuzzy, he kept pouring the beer in the glass straight in, and you get the foam on top of the top of the beer. We had somebody in the group, they got a little impatient with him, and they said, come here. So they took they took the beer, and they showed him how to pour beer in a glass sideways. And old Fuzzy was, gosh, I don't know, he's probably 18, 19, whatever, and I don't think he'd ever seen anybody do that. So from that point on, he understood what we wanted, Every time somebody would yell fuzzy, he'd come running, he'd take the beer order, and he'd come running back with the beer, and he'd pour it sideways like this, and every time he would smile. So I'm sitting here thinking, old Fuzzy, as much as we tip him because he entertained us too, we probably paid him a month or two's salary every night just by the tips. But he was pleasant. Everybody got to enjoy Fuzzy, and he was a good guy. We do some things too, like in this last trip, we did something where we actually had a school of Tai Chi come in and teach us a class. So you can see the guy here in the blue uniform going through and showing us how to do the Tai Chi moves, which I found, I didn't know this, but Tai Chi is based on ancient martial arts, to where you're supposed to learn the techniques of how to do things, but it also too is supposed to clear your mind so you're ready to go to battle and you're relaxed and all this kind of stuff. But regardless, it was something fun to do where we got a chance to get into the culture and everything else, but a lot of fun regardless. Here we are. All of them had their uniforms on, as you can see here. And I guess I was kind of being obnoxious in that knowing that they didn't speak a word of English. To me, they looked like the Beatles from the 1960s, late 60s albums. I was calling this guy Ringo the whole time, and he didn't, he kept smiling because he didn't have a clue what I was saying. But I thought it's funny. Of course, this had to be Yoko. But it was fun just going through the whole group, and everybody was still getting into Tai Chi moves and different things. And that was the hit of the second day of what we did. A lot of fun stuff too. The thing about this too, again, is that you're going to be able to continue to network with the group, and everybody seemed to get along and all this kind of stuff. So again, we have a Facebook group, so the relationships you build with each other, you can contact other people down the road. So if you have an issue, you can ask for help, or if they need help, you can help them. So I'm a big believer that strength in numbers is beneficial to being able to help you grow your business. I actually started out in the franchise business, and having that community, I think, was instrumental. That's kind of really how I try and put together things now. So after that, we even have a one-on-one Skype or phone call, just depending where you live, where we'll talk about everything that you went over in the fair, everything you learned, products you found, questions you may have, just to kind of go over and try and give you another set of eyes on what you're doing, another opinion to help you make better decisions about your business going forward. So that's something that I think is really helpful as well. So again, why you want to go to Private Label Canton here is that ultimately you're going to find new products at the world's largest fair. You're going to the mecca of all products. You're going to find unique products and find them at a fraction of the cost of what you go to Alibaba. You're going to become a very, very advanced seller with your knowledge by the time you go through the 2 days of training. You're going to have access to me and other people as you network with other successful Amazon and e-commerce sellers and become part of a thriving community. You're going to stay at a 5-star resort, and you're going to enjoy exotic China, you're going to eat well, and then we're going to do some coaching time after the fact. And again, it's just fun to do. So anyway, let's talk about some common questions, which I guess I deleted those somehow. But some of the common questions is if I'm a woman, how is it that I travel, by myself? There's certainly some apprehension there. I understand that. But again, we've had enough single women come at this point to where it seems to be normal, and not a single one of them has had any issues, and they've come from different cultures and different races and backgrounds and to where everybody seems to be fine because, again, a very, very safe area, I think, coming through. Some of the cost of things going in, I find that the airfare in here is actually much cheaper than some of the other places that you may fly. I mean, I find coming from the west or east coast of the United States to Canton, which is 12 time zones different, you can't take a longer flight than that. It's like $800. But if I were to fly to Paris, it's like $1,500. So I don't know if it's a combination of the money exchange or just things are cheaper in China. I don't know. But it's really not expensive to go. And the things that you go and you buy there are not expensive. Well, they jack up the hotel prices a little bit. But this is not an expensive trip for what it is. So with that said, that's just a couple of the common things and questions we have. And we'll see if we can take questions here in a second. There we go. The other thing people were talking about is the language. You're in a Western-style tourist area, so nobody has really ever, nobody's had any issues with language at this point. Now, you're going to find everybody in the hotel will speak English, and they'll bend over backwards trying to help you and accommodate you. When you go out, people at restaurants or in the stores or your taxi drivers, they won't speak English. But again, that's not a common or hard thing. One thing, this little tip here, though, to make that easier, is when you're leaving the airport, have your hotel address printed out in Chinese and on a piece of paper and just hand that to the taxi cab driver, and he'll nod, and he'll know where that is, and then you don't have to worry about anything in the translation. Thing about it being advanced enough for somebody who is at a beginning stage. Again, we've had people who are beginning, who are starting, who are all different types of stages, that it's not hard to, there's something there for everybody. And as far as the trip being a long way, yeah, it is. And the jet lag is a killer. But it's something that I think the trade-offs are so much worthwhile to go that I think you have to go. And getting adjusted, going over and coming back, it's hard, but it's still doable. So that said, let's talk about, take some questions here. But in this first, for those of you who are still here, appreciate that. If you want to go to my website here, .com/checklist, that'll be that checklist, that PDF that we talked about as the free gift. And if you want to go and find out more about the fair right now, very inexpensive for what it is, very reasonably priced. I never try and gouge anybody anything, but you'll see the prices there. Let's go to markscottadams.com/Canton-Fair. Now let's go ahead and see if we can jump in and take some questions here. And let me see if I'll scroll back to when people started posting in some questions. First question here is will this be available for recorded later unless there are some tech issues? Yes. Okay, Mark has a question. He says, I hear about people going to Iwo City to source products. Can you compare sourcing at the Iwo market at the Canton Fair? I think going to Iwo is fine. The advantage of Iwo is it's open. Iwo is just right outside of Shanghai, which is in northern China. It is more of a modern type of fair. And I think, to me, Mark, it's fine to go to either one. To me, you get a whole lot more distributors who are there at Iwo City. And, again, I just look at going to the Canton Fair, and I'm thinking, okay, it's with 20,000 vendors, and I guess if you were to go to all three stages, which is roughly 60,000 vendors, I don't think I could find products for the rest of my lifetime. Or, I mean, I could for the rest of my lifetime and then still not be able to tap into them all. I think it's something that I may look at and go into in the future just to see. I've never been to it personally, but I've asked that question for about a year and a half now just to see really what the difference is. But I've come to believe at this stage that the Canton Fair is still more relevant to e-commerce and to private label sellers simply because I think you're dealing more with suppliers. So you're dealing with much smaller companies there, and it's a different type of scenario. I mean, it's more like a merchandise mart that you may have had in your local city somewhere. There's no reason why you couldn't go. I have nothing against Iwo City, but I just see how good the Canton Fair is. And other than just if someone wants to go to both, fine, you can go to both. But I'm just a fan of the Canton Fair because I've just seen the results that have come from it. All right, Dennis has in here, weather-wise, which is the best time to go, April or October? To me, the weather is about the same. I think of it as like going to Florida. If you go to Florida in that time of the year, it's the same exact weather. Because if you look at where Canton is, it's in the southern part of China, which if you were to go horizontally on the map, it's pretty close to like the southern United States. So it's a hot and it's a humid place, but it's not unbearable. I mean, it's not. I mean, there's a modest amount of air conditioning in the building, but your hotel rooms and things where you are all along, it doesn't matter. You're fine. The question here says, tell me about some of the success stories of some of the people have had before. Well, gosh, I think we have taken to this point roughly, I don't know the exact number, I don't count that, but somewhere in the neighborhood, a little short of 100 people, I guess. And over that time, I've had everybody, people who have found their first product. I had an email now, and I guess it's probably been about 3 months ago, where from a buyer who was up to $2,000 a day on one of the products he found there. So do the quick math on that. He has 5 products total. So he's looking at about $1 million a year going forward. That's not sales, that's profit. And he actually went back to this last fair again. And it's not uncommon for people to find their products and then continue to come back and find other products. But like all things, my role is to put you in position to be successful, and it's your role to execute the plan. So we've had people here who multiple 6-figure businesses and everywhere in between. So But the real answer is to that, as I think it ultimately, like in all things, I'd say it depends on you. Mike has written a thing in here talking about the little girl who stole my mojo. He says, when I said chicks dig Amazon men, he says, chicks dig a guy with a big Amazon business. And I think that's right. So, but it just, oh, Mike, it's just so funny. I mean, I don't know how old you are. I don't know if for those of you who are close to my age can identify, but, you know, if I would have been 25, it's like I'd have been insulted. But here it was just like I wasn't even a threat. No, I wasn't even a consideration. And it's like, oh, man. I mean, I know I'm not. But that's kind of what makes it funny is that she was not trying to be that way. But that's just one of the funniest things. That I came back and I told that story to my wife, and she just looked at me and shook her head and just laughed. Oh, funny stuff. Um, all right, Mark writes here, another Mark, I got several Marks on here, says, I'm a newbie currently in the product research phase. No products currently listed at Amazon. Is it too soon to go to the Canton Fair? I'm still ungated in many important categories. Would this be a significant hindrance? Well, Mark, here's my thought. I mean, my real answer is how serious are you about the business and how fast do you want to grow it? I mean, I've seen people come in here to this group and they've started out with 0 products and they've left with, in the next month, they've added 2 or 3. What I think this does is allows you to build your business faster. You don't have to go by any means. I mean, if you think it's better to wait, then you should wait. But I'm just a believer that I'm never one to put a toe in the pool. I'm one to just jump in and cannonball and go. And I found that for me personally, that's worked. I do know that nothing good will happen if you do nothing. So, you know, that's just kind of my thought is I'm just more aggressive than most people. And I think that's a decision that you've got to come to is do you think it's beneficial. I mean, I can sit here and tell you I think it is, but I would rather you come to that conclusion because it's just this is a mindset, I think. You know, the people who come on this trip, this is my favorite event to do when I do live events and virtual events and all kinds of things. But just the people who were there, you can see the focus in their eyes. And even the people who were, I mean, the thing about this business, this is a simple business that you just do the simple things well and you do them over and over. This is not some complex thing that takes years and years and years to learn. So I don't see stages like a lot of people do. But anyway, long-winded way to answer your question is that we have a lot of people who are brand new come. And if you want to come, love to have you. If you think it's better to wait, my plan is to go to every fair anywhere. You can go to the ones in the future. But I just say weigh that out and just see how it comes to you. And in that, Dennis is asking about discounts for second people. Yeah, if you'll see that, we do have discounts for second people. So go to the page, .com, Canton-Fair, and you'll see all of that information together. All right, let's see. Eric was here at one of our live events in Florida. Hi, Eric. Says, can you show the slide or repeat what you said about getting a visa, preparing to go? Sure. What you want to do is, I recall, I can't remember where you told me you lived, Eric. I'm sorry, but whether it's there are 3 consulates in the United States. There's one in D.C., there's one in Chicago, and there's one in Los Angeles. So if you're close to any of those, you just take your passport in, and I think it's on Tuesdays they do this. I think you just walk in and say, I want to get a visa and I want to go to China, and they'll give you they'll take your passport and they'll like put a little sheet. You pay for the visa, and then they stick the little visa sheet into your passport. And then when you're going through customs in China, you'll just show them the visa, and then they'll stamp it, and everything will be fine. But really, what it is, if you live away from one of those 3 places, just Google getting a visa in China, and you'll see the travel agencies pop up, and then just pick one. And what you'll do is you'll mail your passport to the people or to the travel agency, and then it's like $50. They'll take it to the consulate for you and get it stamped for you, and then they'll mail it back to you. So make sure when you're doing your visa, that's about a 2-week process, 2 to 3 week process in there somewhere. Make sure you got enough time on your passport left. Get a new one if it's about to expire, because you still got plenty of time at this point. But just don't procrastinate on that, because that's something you want to have. You don't want to worry about any of those kind of things. But that's basically the process of doing it. And again, everything total, I think it's roughly $140 here in the United States. It's probably comparable prices in Europe or other places, but roughly about $190 with their $50 amount to do that. Or again, if you live close, you don't have to do that. You just walk it in yourself if you want. So hopefully that, if that doesn't answer your question on that, Eric, let me know and I'll address it some more. Mike says, how much cash do you actually need to bring? Their money is called a yuan, and 100 yuan is roughly 15 American dollars. So what I do is I start out, and again, this is something too, I would encourage you to have Chinese money before you leave your country, whether you have it changed at your bank or you go to the exchange places in the airport. Because again, it's not like every place takes a credit card. You're going to have cash to get from the taxi to, or from the airport to your hotel. And what I find is typically about 300 yuan, which is roughly $45 going from a taxi. And when you're doing that, what you're going to find, by the way, is that the trip is about 45 minutes. It's funny, somewhere about the 30-minute part, you go through you're going on like an interstate most of the time, but you're going through this section that's got these really, really old buildings, and it's 30 minutes. You've been on a plane forever. You're tired. You're just run down, and you're sitting there thinking, oh no, they're going to take and sell me off to a work camp somewhere. I don't know what good I'd be. I don't know how much they get for me, but they're going to take me somewhere else other than where I thought. And then all of a sudden, the cab driver is listening to Chinese music up there, hadn't said a word. He just turns around a few minutes later, shows up right in front of the hotel, and turns and he smiles. So, it's one of those things to where it's you need cash. And, some people are okay carrying $20. Some people need to carry 2,000. But I carry a minimum of 500 over, and they've got ATM machines at the nice Western hotels, and that's cheaper to take the money out than exchange it. So that's what I do as far as quantity of money there. What are the dates for the next trip? Hope says, the next dates are April. Again, if you go to the marscottadams.com/Canton Fair, I think it's April 20th through the 25th, which I think off the top of my head, and I might be wrong, Hope, but I think it is, I think that's, that would be, the reception would be like a Thursday evening, the 20th. Friday and Saturday would be the 2 days of training. The first day on a Sunday would be a guided tour, and then the rest of the times. I think it's 20th through, it might be 26, but look on the page here, and you'll see the exact dates. But I think that's right. God, I'm trying to pronounce it. Is it Carinza? I hope that's right. Carinza. Gosh, I hope I got it right. Says you obviously believe in going with in person is worthwhile. From a cost basis, do you really think that you'll be able to get paid back within a reasonable period of time? Well, let me put it this way. I do. Yes. And again, you got to decide that for yourself. And you really have to look at it as, is it an investment or is it an expense to you? If you're not going to do anything, then obviously it's an expenditure to you. And I know that, I don't mean to say that you're not, but if you can, I think I told the story a second ago about Ben, who was one of the students who found his product from whatever it was, $3.15 down to 51 cents. He made that much in one booth, and then the ongoing amounts of his savings. So how much is it worth to have one product that sells? How much is it worth to find 10 products? And again, to me, I'm never worried. I mean, my first business, like 20 some years ago, I spent $150,000 with the hopes of making $50,000. If you adjust that for inflation, that's about like $300 a day and $100 in income. And I had to do 10-year leases, build out employees, buy all kinds of inventories. I mean, it was just work 7 days a week because it was a thing in a mall. So for me to do $3,000, that $5,000, $2,000, whatever your amount is, to be able to have a potential six-figure business, to me, I think there's an easy answer there. And Hans says, hey, Hans, how are you? What you're going to my buddy Hans here, which, his name is Hans. I always tell him that's short for handsome. And I know he's laughing right now. But Hans he's from Australia, and he actually came to my Florida live event, a month or so ago. But it says, where can I register for your April trip? If you go, again, just go to the markscottadams.com/Canton-Fair, and you'll see everything there. I hope you can make it. Love to have you both there. Mike appreciates my humor on the Chinese story, so appreciate that, Mike. Wayne has a question here. What percentage of your turnover do you roughly spend on PPC promotion and driving Amazon's algorithm on new product launches? I don't do PPC on new product launches. I think it's something that I want to have it established. I want to have it optimized before I turn on PPC. So obviously things have changed, and that's really a question for a different topic than what we're doing today. But for anybody who is looking, obviously we've had some drastic changes over the last, whatever it's been, month or so within Amazon. But I'm sitting here thinking about this as just, I've spent time like everybody else in the last month wondering how it affects us. I'm feeling pretty good about things because I think a lot of weak people are going to shake out, and those of us who are left and truly committed to our business are going to have more Amazon real estate to work with now than what we had before. So I'm feeling good about things, and maybe as good as I've ever felt, but it's going to be a little bit different how we had to approach things. But to try and answer your question more specific, Wayne, I didn't do PPC until the product was somewhat established, because I think PPC is not a launch strategy. I think really what PPC does is it accentuates what you already have. And what I find for most people, when they launch, their pictures are not as good as they should be. Their copy is not optimized yet. Their keywords are not quite tuned in. So I would rather somebody spend time on getting all of those on-page things right and get a little bit of track history and take advantage of the honeymoon that Amazon gives you before I turn on PPC. All right. Okay, Mike has a question here. It says, I received some product from China currently sitting in Amazon FBA in Dallas. Over the course of the last few weeks, I haven't had a single sale. Beyond requesting friends, family to buy the product, are there strong strategies within your course that can help gain some sales traction? This is a popular kitchen item. There are thousands of sales monthly, so the demand is there. I'm just buried. Regarding photos, I do have professional photos. It's the listing and promotion needs work. What's your opinion? Well, there's your answer right there, Mike. Because if you, and again, and without obviously having any more information, sometimes people jump into categories that I think are too competitive if they're starting. And I don't know where you are in the process here, Mike, whether it's your first product or ones beyond. But the course, I mean, my simple philosophy in all of this is to try and find a product that makes $1,000 a month on your first product, and then learn through what you're doing, go through the learning curve, and then you can either easily add other products at that level, or if you want to scale up into other bigger volume type of products, the $5,000, $10,000 a month products, you at least have a little bit of leg of experience to do that. I think this is not hard to do, but like all things, you need to do it. You need to progress through it. I think a lot of times many people don't have the patience to wait. And as much as I wish I could direct everybody to say, try and do it this way, inevitably some people go for products that have such a high volume of competition that they don't have the background or experience to be able to do that. So without seeing everything as is, Mike, my guess is, since this is such a high volume item as you suggest, that my guess is it's a very competitive item, and then without some kind of unique way to approach it, then it's kind of, it's you know, it's hard to stand out. So that's why I think part of how you pick products and the system we use to pick products that are at that $1,000 a month level, which again, it's not going to buy anybody a Learjet. I fully understand that. But it's a process of getting paid while you learn, so you progress until you're ready to compete at those higher levels. But Mike, I wish I could tell you something more, but without all the different stuff, I don't know the real answer to that. All right, Crenza, she says it means love and peace. Well, that sounds wonderful, because again, Mark means warrior. I think in Greek or Roman or something. So I kind of guess we're at opposites there, but love and peace I think should win out there. Wayne says, thanks, Mark. That's really useful to know in the great feedback. Mike says, is this covered in your course? Not the China. I mean, this is a separate thing. Well, if you mean the content of what we go over, we touch on it. We just go over it here into much more detail and do it live and are able to interact back and forth. So it's something that I think is extra stuff. All right, Mike says it was a test product that only had 150 pieces, and he did it to gain experience. Well, that's the way you do it, Mike. I mean, and here's the reality of it. You know, anybody who tells you you just show up and you throw a product to Amazon and you make millions of dollars, they're blowing smoke, you know where. And it's just, there are steps that you take that, whether it's at the live events or in the courses or things that I'm trying to tell you how to pick products that I think will work. And there's obviously no guarantees in anything. There's no guarantee that anybody will be successful if you go on a trip like this. But again, I keep coming back to the fact that if you do nothing, you're guaranteed to have nothing. So what I try and do in this is that I've done thousands of products over my career. And obviously I have not gotten them all right. I don't think anybody has. But I've gotten the vast majority right in a significantly higher percentage than most other people. And one of the things when we walk through the fair, I'll sit here and tell you why I think a particular product would work and why it wouldn't. And basically what we're trying to teach you how to do here is identify, say, a certain quantity of products. And then you're going back to your room at night using Jungle Scout or some other type of product, and you're determining the market and your competition. And maybe if you pick 50 that day, you eliminate 30 because you think the market's too competitive. And then you go back and you deal with suppliers the next day and you find that, okay, maybe 15 just don't work. The price is too expensive. The turnaround time is too long for whatever reason. But yet out of that 50, maybe you're left with 4, 5, 6, 7 different potential products, and you start out with the best one, and then you just keep releasing products after that. But to me, the way I try and teach is I just think this is an incredibly simple business that people, for whatever reason, self-sabotage. Not on purpose, but they just kind of shoot themselves in the foot or trip over their own feet. And I just spend time trying to get people to keep things simple. It's funny. I start out every webinar or seminar I do almost with the phrase, the dumber I get, the more money I make. Because inevitably with all the people I've coached, people just try and make this harder. You're looking for a certain product. And by the way, there is no such thing as a perfect product, but you try and get as close as you can. You evaluate your competition, you launch it, and you go. And, you may launch 10 products and find 8 do exactly what you had planned. 1 far exceeds, and 1 is a total bomb. But I've had many people who have launched their first product and not done anywhere near as what they wanted, but yet they realized what they did well and what they didn't do well in that first launch, and then they come back and their future products do extremely well. So don't give up on that. If just keep going. That's part of the process. This is persistence is usually rewarded. Okay, John's saying product have before you start a PPC campaign. Product have before. John, I'm not sure if you let the word out or I'm just not understanding that or something. Can you retype that in? I mean, do you mean, I'm not really sure what you mean there. I'll try and answer it. I'm not sure what you mean. Christina says, where do I get more information on your course? I guess the FBA course you're talking about. Christina, that is at FBA, is in Fulfillment by Amazon, FBAHeadstart.com. FBAHeadstart.com. John just typed in, product have before you start a PPC campaign. I guess maybe I'm just being dense or something, but I mean, you obviously want to have a product and have it listed and have it up and running before you start a PPC campaign. I'm not sure. Are you okay? I say, how many reviews? Used to be 25, but as they've changed things now, I think in terms of how we did, let's just talk about reviews for a second. Used to, when I started out almost 3 years ago now, you didn't have review groups. You didn't have large quantity of reviews. You really had to go out and run Facebook ads. You got friends and family and things just to review your product for you. So in that case, it was a little bit harder to do, and then all these Facebook groups came along, and I even had a review group for people in my course. And it became very, very easy to get good listings very quickly by getting a large number of reviews. Well, as we all know, Amazon has changed that. So I think, too, as many people have lost reviews or even were doing things the right way, you don't need near the quantity of reviews that you needed before. I think ultimately, to answer your question on PPC and reviews, I used to say 25 because I wanted there to be a little bit of, quote, social proof in there. I wanted you to have time to optimize your page and to make sure it was converting because, again, all PPC does is it magnifies what you're already getting. If your page is converting well and selling well, when you run PPC, you're going to get more of that. If your page is horrible, you don't have good pictures, and your titles are not connecting with the right keywords, you can run PPC until you're blue in the face, and it's not going to work any better than the percentages of what your item is converting currently. So I think people want to jump on the PPC bandwagon like it's some magic bullet to cure any lack of sales, and I don't think it is. But again, a long way to come back. I think now if you just had 4 or 5 reviews, I think you're fine before you start turning on PPC, because again, this almost like a revalue of the currency, if you will, where reviews have been cut back a lot as far as quantity goes. So, you know, a handful now I think is fine before you get started. And gosh, I'm okay. And Wayne says, would you pay for Vine reviews? I would. I haven't. I mean, I'm again, I get big on semantics. I think, you know, the terminology, I guess technically is paying for reviews there. Is it like what, $1,500 or something, whatever it is to do the Vine? I can't remember. I might be wrong off the total of that. I don't keep up with some of the minor details, but whatever that amount is, that's a small drop in the bucket if it can increase your sales and you get that back in a short time. I mean, what if you paid $1,500 and you got that money back and increased sales in 2 months? You know, what is that? I mean, over the course of a year, that's a several 100% return. But yet we all talk about investing in a stock that maybe gets 7 to 10% over the course of a year. So yeah, if you think you can get reviews and your product will get good reviews from that, I think that's one of many good things to do. I mean, I'm all for, I mean, I know the cost of nothing and the value of everything. And it is, you know, as simple as that sounds, most people know the cost of everything and the value of nothing. So I have no problem with dropping $1,500 if it's going to pay me back many, many times over. Gosh, I hope I've got this it's YGAL. Gosh, I'm not even going to pretend to pronounce it. Just know I'm trying hard. You recommend to have as a test order. You mentioned earlier that you were different ones. You recommend to have as a or how many items do you recommend to have as a test order? I'm going to be very frank with you. I don't do test orders because I do research going in, and I'll buy a minimum of 400 or 500 products because I'm going to sell them. And again, I realize that's different than most people, but I'm just not a fan of putting a toe in the pool. I want a cannonball in. But if I were going to test order something, you know, again, 20, 30, 40 maybe. You know, a lot of people will go to AliExpress and they'll get something that's not branded, doesn't have the right packaging, and they'll go ahead and do a test order like that. I am not a fan of that because I don't think that's an apples to apples test. I'd rather go in, have the actual brand, the actual pictures, everything looking the way it's supposed to be, because to me, that's more the actual test, because I'd like to think that I've never had a product where I haven't made money, obviously more some than on others. But worst possible case, and I completely am dead wrong, I can drop the price and I'm going to get my money back if I'm dead wrong. So I'm fortunate to have the budget and whatever else to be able to do that. But, and I'm not trying to dismiss your question here, but I'm just, you know, whatever it takes you to get a comfortable answer. And in reality, I don't think there's an actual number to that. But if I were to try and guess a number, you know, maybe 100, you know, maybe 50, I don't know. I mean, I just try and do a little bit bigger than that, I guess. Just lost my place. Hold on. Scrolling down. Okay, Hope here says, you mentioned earlier that you were not able to connect on Google, et cetera. Were Seller Central and Amazon have it accessible? Will the hotel have Wi-Fi? Is there an internet? What is the internet like? For those keeping up with our accounts, it's nice to know. Yeah, Amazon is something that you can access. The hotel has really, or I should say the Langham has as good a hotel or internet as you're going to have in the United States. And in reality, if you get this VPN software, which is like $13 a month, I mean, or while you're there, which is nothing. I mean, geez, I mean, you got access to everything. If you go into some of the lesser expensive hotels and the lesser things, they may not. It might not be as fast of internet, but this is the first time I stayed at the Langham on our last trip, Hope, and I'm just going to tell you, it was just, you know, if I'd have closed my eyes, I would have been in an expensive hotel in New York, San Francisco, somewhere like that. All right, Mark here has a question on shipping. It says, shipping and custom logistics, do you let the Chinese supplier handle the process? Yes. Absolutely. The less I have to do, the better. And the thing about that is if there is an issue, I can call a supplier, and the shipper will be more likely to call the supplier and deal with them and respond to them because they deal with them on a regular basis. I'm just a one-shot deal. John says, thanks. Well, thank you. Lorenzo says, when would you say is the cutoff period necessary for the fair? Lorenzo, it'll take approximately, I mean, again, if you walk up and do it, you can do it the same day if you're close enough to one of the consulates. But the 3 weeks is reasonable. But, you know, again, I've had people who has scrambled, and I mean, you can expedite these things and do things like overnight and whatever and probably get this process done within a week. But I'm not one who procrastinates. And if I were you, I would, and if you want to go, I would get it as soon as possible so you don't have to worry about anything, because inevitably we always have 1 or 2 procrastinators who go with us, and they always end up in a panic in the last week or 2 or 3 because they haven't done what they were told to do 6 months ago. Inevitably we get it worked out, but it creates a lot of duress for them that is quite unnecessary. So that's one of those things I would say do as soon as possible. But, you know, again, account for reasonably a month, and there's probably a little bit of cushion built into that. All right, folks, if we could, let's kind of keep this to the Canton Fair on some of the questions. Okay. All right, folks, any more questions on the fair? We've actually gone a little bit longer than what I had planned, but again, the rule in my house is lose your breath, lose your turn. So I talk a little bit when I get excited about going to the fair and that type of thing. So anyway, folks, I hope this was helpful to you. Eric says, is a tourist visa okay? That's what I have, Eric. That's something that you want to go and do. You want to do like, it'll give you like 10 years. It's much easier to get, and it's much easier to or to hang around, and it's much cheaper in the long run. So that's what I would do. Yeah, you're right. It says, looks like a business requires the invitation letter. Yeah, because what will happen is when you send your, you got to show the hotel of where you're staying. So if you booked it, say in this trip, and you booked at the Langham, you just give them the Langham address. But what these but travel agencies will have is they will have something that they'll have like a standard hotel that they'll use that they'll just fill in for you, and they'll take care of all that for you. But really, for that $50 to have them handle and manage everything, especially not having to drive to the area, that's just well worth it. One of the things in China is if you are there, I think less than 72 hours, you don't have to do it. But in this case, don't get tempted to do that because you're going to be there longer than that. And I was just going to say, this is something that's a long trip. It's just do the little simple things, do them as soon as you can, because when you have anxiety, I see certain people do things different ways. The people who get their visa, get their invitation, they're all excited about finding products. They're putting their effort and their emphasis doing that. The people who are procrastinators, they don't get the head start they should get because they're doing their travel plans at the very last minute. And I don't know why people do that, but inevitably we do. But anyway, all right. Eric says that makes sense. Thanks. You're welcome. Dennis says, can't make the April trip, but will you have another in October? I plan to at this point, but I keep going back as long as I keep having fun. So like I said, I plan to, but no guarantee. Patrick says, can you explain about the 2-day training? In the 2-day training, Patrick, we go in and we start out and we go over what I believe are the important things the first day of how to identify and use the right keywords, how to find the right markets, how to judge competition. We talk about everything on page with your titles and bullet points and the copy, and we talk about how to do certain pictures, and we talk about everything on an advanced level that comes up. And we even have on both days actually some coaching to where everybody has the opportunity to ask about their business and get their own issues resolved. It's really, The training is really, it's more of a workshop where it's an interactive type of thing. It's not a presentation where I'm teaching, we're going over things. And the group of people usually somewhere is in the low 30s is what we've had, which is a small enough group to know everybody's name, and you can sit and just talk about things that are there, and I leave a little bit of time to adapt it to whatever things come up. The second day, we're talking about things that are a little bit more advanced, like maybe how to take advantage of sea shipping if somebody wants to go that direction. Other things like that, how to find freight forwarders, brokers, all the kind of stuff that are kind of what I would say step 2 type of things. But ultimately, we're spending a large part of that day going over how to deal with suppliers, how to deal with them at the fair, how to identify products at the fair. And again, as simple as it sounds, there's a lot of subtleties that basically what I just did is I went through and thought of the 20-some years I've been going to trade shows, that I wrote down everything, that the subtleties of basically how to negotiate with them. Everybody wants to negotiate on price, but we get into other ways to negotiate, whether it be turnaround time, whether it be future ways to negotiate that a lot of times people hadn't thought of simply because they haven't been exposed to. And I just have, because I've done so much of it over the years. And even one of those things, one of those ideas, I think is a very unique approach that I don't think most people really are familiar with. So we're just trying to expose you to everything that I know, where I just think of it as the term or brain dump, reading my experience, whatever you want to call it, to where you're able to jump in that front of the line, if you will, of knowledge and experience of being able to go and take control of that fair and find products and build your business. So ultimately, it's a 2-day training session, workshop, if you will, to make your Amazon business better and make you more productive at the fair. The question here is, you're welcome, Patrick. Says, and the gal has, says, when you get a deal, says when you make a deal with a supplier at the fair, do you have to pay an initial payment there? Is there an agreement? I have never actually paid at the fair because I have no way to pay unless it's just going to be with a credit card. But usually you'll agree to terms, whether it's a certain down payment, whatever it is, and they'll give you, okay, it's X amount of dollars, here are the terms, et cetera. And then they'll give you some kind of a written, good for 30 days kind of thing. And as I said earlier, I have never done anything other than say, yeah, let me take it home and look at it, and then I contact them after the fair. And if there's any future negotiation, or I found somebody after that, I might go back and forth and make a lesser offer or offer something else and still do a little negotiation. But I've never made, quote, the agreement at the fair itself, because again, I know I'm tired and I'm not at 100% in thinking. It just makes me feel better to come back home and mull it over a little bit, because again, it's not in their culture to arm twist. They're not going to say, hey, this is good for while you're at the fair. They're not going to do any of that American stuff that is annoying. So very easy to deal with, and you can pay them, again, whether it be a wire transfer, PayPal, whatever, they're fine with that. I've never had anybody have an issue with that, or has anybody who's gone to the group had any issue with that. So you can do that in a variety of different ways, whatever way you're most comfortable with. All right. Anything else? All right. Well, thank you. Yeah. All right. Getting a couple of thanks here from everybody. Well, gosh, I certainly appreciate all of that. And I appreciate everybody being here. And I hope this was helpful to everybody here. So with that said, folks, appreciate you being here. I hope it's something that you want to go on the trip. And if you got any questions, or if I missed you on something, please let me know. And I'll see if I can try and answer it by email. So thanks again, and see everybody next time.